Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Tuesday, January 4th, 2022, 7 p.m. meeting of the Planning Board. I'd like to start this with the Pledge of Allegiance, which Charlie will be leading us in. Followed by that, you may be seated at that time for a brief moment of reflection. Please rise.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. This time, I'd like to establish voting members. We are currently 2 regular members down, so I would like to make a motion to appoint both alternates. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, Christopher and Pam will be joining us this evening. That'll be a total of 7 members. At this time, are there any additions or deletions to the agenda? Do we have a motion for the approval of the agenda? Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Please take a moment to review the meeting minutes of last meeting. And when you're done, please if I can get a motion.
The minutes weren't included in this meeting. It got on there by accident. Sorry.
I don't believe we have any minutes to approve, so we don't have the packet. So I think we'll shelve that until next month's meeting. All in favor of deferring? Let me do that correct. Thank you, Charlie. Do we have a motion to defer? Second. All in favor?
There you go.
There you go. We're official now. All right, we're going to get into the agenda items. We'll start with rezoning case CZ 2020-009, which is Studley. This time, the staff will come present it. This will be followed by the applicant making some a presentation and brief comments, and then at that time it will go for public comment. Good evening, Bjorn.
Evening, members of the Planning Board. This is a rezoning request, CZ 2020-009. We call it Studley because it's the applicant's last name. This is a request to rezone approximately 6 acres on one piece of land in Monroe Township, currently zoned RA40 to B4 with conditions. In order to add mini storage buildings to the existing site, list of conditions are below, and the business already exists on the site. This area where you're looking at the site, this is immediately to the west of the existing business that's on the same property. These U-Haul rentals would be removed and essentially replaced with mini storage and a fence. This is the existing business on 75. This is looking north at the railroad tracks across NC 75, and this is looking west of the site towards Mineral Springs. This is the site plan associated with it. This rezoning will really bring the existing business into compliance with zoning because it's obviously a business with RA40 zoning, and it will add the mini storage to the site. There's currently a rental house in this area that will be removed in order to make this work, and the applicant would be limited to the layout and the conditions as specified earlier. In terms of the development status, do have a fair amount of residential development along the corridor with some business development. In terms of environmental features, historically there was a creek that crossed through the property. It's been shifted to the east, where it's essentially a ditch between the properties. Otherwise forested to the rear, with, cleared out with businesses towards NC 75. In terms of zoning, some of the properties were zoned to light industrial back in the 1980s. Otherwise, it's generally RA40, some RA20, and it's all in the county. In terms of transportation, NC 75, 2-lane road, long-range plan is for it to be multi-lane. That's not funded. It's not going to be funded for some time. There is an all-way stop that is funded for implementation soon at NC 75 and Fletcher Broom to help with safety concerns at that intersection. Traffic volumes, about 7,000 cars a day on NC 75. This development would not be required to put in turn lanes. They're going to modify the access along their existing business to make it from a continuous curb cut and delineate it so there'll be more controlled access. In terms of the land use plan, it's all showing up as purple because it is a employment corridor, which is a half-mile buffer off of NC 75. Doesn't mean that every parcel is appropriate to put in industrial or business type of uses, but it's a good starting point. And so that's the land use recommendation for this area. In terms of public feedback, a community meeting was held. 5 residents attended. The only comment was and request was to limit hours of service in the evening, which was met and is one of the conditions. In terms of staff report and recommendations, the negative is that you have commercial uses immediately adjacent to large lot residential. However, the positives are it brings existing business into compliance with zoning, and the use is consistent with the land use plan. So we recommend approval of this proposal. And I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. Otherwise, I would be followed by the applicant.
Curious, how many units are you planning, the storage units? How large will the size be?
Based off of the site plan, which is tough to read, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, about 50 individual stalls. Gary, does that sound about right? 39? Okay. It's 39 stalls. So you have the 3 buildings that are shown here on the plan, so that's essentially what it is.
And one last question.
Yes.
Why a storage building in this site? Is it anticipating the growth of the area for people to store their things? I'm just trying to understand what the intention is.
That's really a question for the applicant.
Any further questions for Bjorn at this time?
What were the hours agreed upon for the evening shut-off?
Between 6, they would be, actually that should be reversed. Our storage units will be open to the public between 6 and 9 p.m., so they won't be open after that. So that text should be reversed.
Okay.
Any further questions? Thank you, Bjorn.
All right,
This
thank
time
you.
I'd like to call the applicant, Mr. Gary A. Studley. Come on up, sir.
You need the slideshow?
Excuse me?
You need the slideshow for anything?
No, I don't. No. My name is Gary Studley. I own the Hot Rod Shop out on Highway 75, and right now we restore antique cars, we build hot rods. And to answer your question about the storage units, some of the storage units will be used for existing. I've got cars in the shop right now that I'm waiting on parts, and cars that people from around the United States will send me cars. And I can't let them sit outside, so what I'm doing is I'm letting them sit inside my main shop, where I could be using it for workspace. So some of the units will be storage for cars. Can I answer any questions, or?
Any questions for the applicant? No?
Okay.
Mr. Studley,
Yes, sir.
When you build, you put these extra buildings here, and it's obviously gonna put everything from your business on the roof where nothing stick out in the front.
That is correct.
Oh, you didn't get any extra employees out of this, anything like that?
Excuse me, sir?
Oh, you didn't get any extra employees out of this, or you?
I'm
this is a whole thing for you?
I'm hoping when I can move the cars from the main shop and put them into storage buildings, I can get back to where I was before the 08 recession. I had 12 employees there. So I'm hoping to add employees.
Very good, okay.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Okay,
Thank
thank
you,
you.
sir.
Okay.
All right. This time we would open up to public comment on this particular agenda. I do not see anyone that has signed up. With this, as well as the other two, we will have persons wishing to speak for or against tonight's agenda have signed up on the forms provided outside. If you wish to speak on any agenda item, not only this one but the others, but have not done so, please let Amy know and she'll get you added to the list. When your time comes to speak during public comment period, please state your name, address, whether you're speaking in favor or against the agenda item. You'll have exactly 3 minutes to make your comments. We will notify you when there are 30 seconds remaining, then again when there's 15 seconds remaining. Louis will be coordinating that. He'll be raising one hand.
Yeah, I tell you, I'll do it a little easier than last time.
Oh, here we go.
At 2.5 minutes, I'm gonna raise a hand. If I don't get attention, I'm gonna wave at you, so you'll know you got 30 seconds to go, okay? If I have to, if you don't look at the wall for some reason, I'll say 30 seconds. But I don't have to do that. That sound good?
Sounds great, Louis.
Yes, all right.
No extra time is allowed unless any board member has questions specifically to ask you, at which time you may respond to that question only. No person is allowed to give up their time to add to the time limit for another person. Once your 3 minutes are up, we'll ask that you be seated. Anyone continuing to speak beyond their allotted time will be asked to return to their seat. Should someone continue beyond that request, they will be deemed out of order and asked to leave. While many of the items we cover at these meetings may become contentious and emotions may run high, we ask that everyone remain civil, respectful, and professional at all times. At no time will it be acceptable for anyone to disparage the board, applicant, or any speaker. Shouting, name-calling, or any other disrespectful behavior will result in being asked to leave or removed. These rules are in place to ensure a fair and productive meeting. Thank you in advance for your cooperation. So at this time, is there anyone that has not signed up for this particular one that would like to speak? Thank you. This time, public.
Can we take Mr. Studley and handle him first? Or we handle Mr. Studley before we begin this next one?
We're closing the public comment session and discussing. So at this time, the public comment session is closed for this particular case. May speak amongst yourselves. Or any of your thoughts on this?
I don't see a problem. It's, he's gonna put some other buildings up there, which is gonna make the business place look more like a business and less stuff outside, so I think it's a winner.
Christopher? Pam? Vice Chairman Fish?
I feel it'll be a nice addition to the Monroe-Waxhaw Highway. You do see a lot of cars sitting out front out there from time to time, and if he can get back to 12 employees working, I think every time you turn around, you see and hear of different cars that are being rebuilt, things like that, and this will be a good addition to Union County, in my opinion. I have no problem with it.
Any further board discussion at this time? Do we have a motion?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Moving on to a case from December's meeting, case CZ 2021-007, Blue Star Solar. Bjorn?
Good evening, members of the planning board. This is a continuation of CZ 2021-007, Blue Star Solar rezoning. And I know that most of you saw this presentation last month, but for the benefit of the full board, I'll go through the complete application. It's a rezoning of 4 parcels totaling 593 acres in southern Union County, requesting rezoning from RA 40 to RA 200 with conditions in order to build a solar farm. These conditions include setbacks from the property lines of at least 200 feet, includes vegetative buffers, and this additional text is a result of the dialogue between the property owner who spoke last month and the applicant to allow a installation of trees between 6 and 8 feet along all those properties where the homes back up to this and there isn't a forest already there. So these would be planted as soon as possible before construction and disturbance to install the solar panels would occur, which presumably would give them time to mature and give additional screening. This would not be a berm, which was talked about, but was deemed not feasible by the applicant. The construction hours, again, wouldn't be in the middle of the night, and there'd be no lighting at night, decommissioning at the end of the useful life, and this is additional statement, a request that's typically made is for vesting for 5 years based on this approved site plan and list of conditions. Vicinity of the area, a lot of agricultural and forested areas surrounding the parcels, but there's a large perimeter, so it doesn't necessarily reflect everything, but this is the general character, a lot of 2-lane roads and agricultural, rural, residential. In terms of the site plan, the area I was referring to with the residences is up here, where I have my cursor. That's where the trees would be planted to give them a head start. Otherwise, the hatcheted areas where the solar panels would be located. You have wetlands and streams bisecting the site, and they're shown with the light blue color. And the access for power generation, there's power lines that cross through the area, and there'd be access to add the power to the network over here. In terms of development status, you do have a few subdivisions in the area, but largely undeveloped, large tracts of land. Terrell Drive is the one that was referring to earlier. It's a little bit easier to see with these homes here against the property. Environmental features, again, you can see that there are streams and wetlands and floodplain across the property, and they meet all of our standards for setbacks and protection of those resources. In terms of the zoning, there are some commercial properties at the intersection of Rocky River and 200. In terms of transportation, there is a funded roundabout at that same intersection. Hopefully it'll be built in the next year or two, but otherwise there's no improvements in the area, and this site, apart from the construction traffic when it's actually being built, will generate virtually no traffic. In terms of the land use plan, you see that it's largely rural residential. Public feedback, there were 2 community meetings that were held. One was virtual, one was in person. Approximately 30 people attended between the 2 of them. Questions about operating noise, screening, and construction noise were raised at those meetings. One letter was received by a resident, the one who spoke at the meeting last month, requesting a berm installation adjacent to the existing residences. Staff report and recommendation. Negatives are that it's the scale of the disturbance out of character with surrounding areas and will remove a significant amount of agricultural land from cultivation, but the positives are that the use and intensity is consistent with the adopted land use map for the area, because it's RA 200, which is essentially 5-acre lots. The development will not produce noise, light, or traffic impacts. It'll be developed with buffering above what we would require, and the appraisal assessing the impact on the adjacent properties said this will not substantially injure the values of the adjacent budding properties. So because of that, we recommend approval. And the applicant is here to answer questions and present any additional information.
Thank you, Bjorn. Before we get to the applicant, does anyone have any questions for Bjorn? Thank you, Bjorn.
Yes, sir.
You passed out a sheet. You made some comment about 2B, will plant trees, et cetera. Does this satisfy the berm concern of the homeowner?
I haven't received communication back from the property owner to be able to answer that, but presumably the applicant has been in communication with them and knows the answer to that, so I'll defer to them.
Okay. Did you prepare this, or?
This is, I mean, these conditions are copy and pasted from what they have proposed. And we worked on them together, but
All right.
it's
Thank you very
ultimately
much.
their proposal.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Bjorn. At this time, I'd like to call the applicant forward. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Board. I'm Tom Terrell. I'm here as legal counsel to Blue Star Solar and its parent company, Pine Gate Renewables. Before I say who's coming with me, if I could just answer Mr. Fisher's question, say, yes, I think that property owner's concern has been addressed, but I will give you a little more information on that. There are 4 of us here who collectively drove over 1,000 miles to get here and back to be here in Monroe tonight. With me, representing Pine Gate Renewables, is Mr. Logan Secord. That's the parent company for Blue Star Solar. You're going to hear from Tom Delafield in just a moment. Mr. Delafield has a company called Renewable Energy Services that is the developer of this project for Blue Star. And probably the most important person is Mr. Nicholas Kuhn, who is here. Mr. Kuhn is the chief landscape architect for Kemley Horn, which, as many of you know, is one of the largest engineering firms based in the Southeast, with a headquarters here in North Carolina. We're really back before you tonight to address some technical concerns related to a buffer. I think if everybody remembers December 7th, that there was one neighbor who was concerned that he and his wife would hear the solar panels moving because these are trackers. I think they now understand that those trackers make zero noise. You cannot hear them as they follow the sun across the sky. But the issue was raised as to whether or not a berm would be better than a buffer. We have come back to enhance the buffer and to explain to you why that berm really does not work. We think that we have, and can demonstrate it by the absence of neighbors who were here at the last meeting. We have made everybody happy but the one neighbor, and sometimes it's hard to make everybody happy, but I think by the fact that the neighbors, the mayors, are not here tonight, that they are satisfied with what we have offered. We asked to meet with them on their property, and they declined that invitation. There have been several emails back and forth, and they are aware of what we're offering, which I will sum up in this way, as that we are offering 3 additional conditions in addition to vegetative buffers that are 5 times thicker than required by the county, and in addition to setbacks that are 4 times stricter than are required by the county. And those 3 extra conditions are, number 1, at the time that construction permits are requested, that we shall bond the buffer for the project so that if any vegetation were to die and there was a failure to replace it, there is a bond in place at that time. Number 2, that the minimum height of planting of the trees in other parts of the project is 6 feet at the time of planting. But let me tell you what the most important one is, and let me give you a context here. I was one of the early people, if not one of the earliest attorneys to work in renewable energy in the Southeast. I've done it in 4 states. I have represented over a dozen companies, maybe 150 different projects, and this is a new condition I have never seen offered. None of the members of the team I'm with have ever heard this offered. But we think we're doing this for the very first time here in Union County. There is a lag time between when you get approved by Duke Energy and the time construction can start. This is just built into the process. When you see a solar farm go up, it's because there has been a lot that has taken place, typically over years, to get there. What we offer against those 8 parcels, this is instead of a berm on that northern boundary, is to, as soon as what's called a power purchase agreement is approved with Duke Energy, Blue Star Solar shall go out within that next 6 months. If it's in the middle of summer, that's not the time to plant vegetation, but we need that lag time to get into autumn or winter. But within 6 months, they shall plant all the trees against the 8 parcels that are in question, which gives them about 2.5 or more, 3 years or more lead time for growth. They shall be at least 6 to 8 feet in height at time of planting, so that when the time of construction starts, those panels will be pretty well concealed. Mr. Tom Delafield can show you these. I'm glad to answer any questions for you, but if you don't, I can have Mr. Delafield walk you through that and show you. And of course, Mr. Nicholas Kuhn is here as well. By the way, I did forget to acknowledge Mr. Stan Purser is here. He's one of the landowners. He's a multi-generational citizen in this county. Can I answer any questions? Because if not, I'll have Mr. Delafield step up.
I have a series of questions, but I don't know who to ask.
Well, why don't you start now, and I can tell you who can answer them if I can't.
Beautiful, thank you.
Sure.
So I was reading and I see it's a 40-year basically shelf life. And what I'm understanding is when it's done with 40 years, you take the equipment off and then restore the land back to the way it was?
That's correct. By contrast, if this was a subdivision, that's permanent. This is a borrowing of the land, and it goes back to an agriculture or timber use.
Okay, so there's no intention to upgrade the technology to continue the solar farm. It's just the 40-year life?
That's exactly right. The landowners have a right to get it back. The lease creates rights to that point. Now, there may be an effort to renegotiate at some point, but there's no obligation. Mr. Purser or his children could say, absolutely not, my land comes back to me.
So then with that in mind, I'm taking away that the intention then is obviously the renewable, energy, the power
Yes.
Is that to benefit the community of the power to source that through Duke Energy so other people have that access? Or are they basically taking that and selling that energy and getting the benefits of that for basically leasing their land?
Are you saying, are the property owners doing it out of the goodness of their heart?
No, I'm not saying the goodness of heart. I know everything is a business transaction.
Okay.
There's definitely, they're not donating the land, I get
Right.
that. I'm just trying to understand the intention of the solar on their land. Is it something that they're selling to Duke and getting that money for, and then somehow that energy gets utilized by Union County? I'm just
Yes.
educating me on that.
Let me, Alex, answer it in two ways. Number one, yes, this is their determination that this is the highest and best use of their land. And I assume by the fact that you're a board member, you live in Union County, and you have probably seen over the past couple of decades the explosion of subdivisions in the rural areas and the shopping centers. And people 20 years ago would be shocked at what they see today. This can go back. Now, when that energy goes onto the grid, it's very complicated as to how it is managed. But for the most part, that energy that is put onto the grid ends up being used locally. Now, when you say local, it does not mean in maybe 5 miles, but yes, it would be within a reasonable area around this. Now, but what it does for the people of Union County is it helps to stabilize the cost of their electricity. What they can know is that the more that Duke Energy is purchasing something, its energy from solar, its costs are fixed. Mr. Purser, I've never seen his lease, but he has a lease that has it's got some step-ups at some point to account for cost of living, but Duke Energy knows that it can buy that energy at a flat rate. If it used other sources of energy, it's at the mercy of the rising and falling of international markets and cost that sometimes get passed on to you and me as ratepayers.
I'm familiar with solar.
I'm if I'm telling you what you know, I apologize.
No, not at all, and I appreciate that education, I do. So last question, has anyone looked into the flight path restrictions for this area? Because right now, that's Charlie pathway. So when you're flying, airlines are flying, they're coming out of Charlotte, that's what they call the Charlie sense when you're coming in creation. So I'm just wondering, with the reflection of the solar, is there any restrictions in that?
I have somebody behind me who can answer that. I will tell you that I have been in many, many public hearings where this issue, though, has come up. And generally, solar panels which absorb light and aren't designed to reflect it are less reflective than lakes, oceans, ponds, things like that, tops of chicken houses. Those are reflective surfaces. So this is a surface that's much less reflective.
I understand, I just was wondering if that
Yeah.
was, okay.
Pam, just for what it's worth, I'm a licensed pilot. I fly over solar farms all the time, and there's never a restriction on them.
My husband's a pilot too, and he said, ask the question.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask Mr. Delafield if he would step up.
Thank you.
Good evening, members of the board. I'm Tom Delafield, Director of Project Development for Renewable Energy Services. Before I get started, I did want to quickly mention that contrary to what Mr. Terrell just said, the mayors are in attendance here this evening, and we do not wish to speak for them as to whether this satisfied their concerns or not. We have had some communication since the last meeting, but again, with them here, we won't seek to, we'll let them speak for themselves. So my presentation here will be short and sweet. This is purely a look at the visualizations that we had done by Mr. Kuhn and his team, looking at the differences or what the end result would be of this proposal that we've put forward of the planting of the vegetation prior to construction. So again, just to quickly go through the mechanics of it, upon signing a long-term power purchase agreement with Duke Energy, which is that long-term contract for the sale of energy, we would, within 180 days, allowing us time to procure vegetation and schedule the work, come and plant that vegetation. That would allow that vegetation time to become established. If any of it doesn't survive, it would give us time to replace it, and then it's several years to grow and mature from there before we show up and begin constructing the solar farm. So let's see, just going to click through here. This is location 3, the spot in question. The image in the top right is what's existing right there. As you can see, the land slopes very gently down towards the tree line, and the image as shown here shows essentially day 1 of commercial operation of the solar farm. It typically takes, or I guess as Tom mentioned, we would typically see about a 24-month lag time in between the approval of the project and the construction of it, and that is primarily for Duke to build out any system upgrades that are required as a part of this project. So we're somewhat beholden to their timeline as far as that's concerned. But that is the typical lag that we're seeing and what we're modeling for this project. And with a 9 to 12 month construction timeline, we believe that essentially, again, 3 years from the time that the power purchase agreement is signed, the solar farm should be operational, and this is what it will look like. An additional 2 years of growth will completely obscure the view of the solar farm. We have Mr. Kuhn here to talk a little bit about the stormwater differences between a berm and the vegetation itself. That was one of the main decision factors in deciding to go with this new and, as you heard, unique approach that we've not utilized on other projects. And that's really it. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions from the board at this time?
Yes, ma'am.
What kind of trees are going to be planted there? That's going to be maple and whatnot, or is that going to be?
Yeah, it's pretty hard to see, but the common names for the vegetation, and again, these will all be 6 to 8 feet at the time of planting, are maple trees, loblolly pines, tulip poplars, can't read that bottom one, eastern red cedar.
The only reason I'm asking is because that's when they have leaves on the tree. When we go through our fall, because we still have seasons here, we go through fall and winter, you'll see, I mean, I understand that the pine trees will continue to be green, but it'd be interesting to see, you know, what it looks like with leaves on the tree as well. That's just a consideration.
I have a question. We'll going back to the solar system.
Yes, sir.
I remember last time we were here, I asked about why would Duke Power want to buy electricity from a solar farm, and one of you gentlemen told me that's because they sell the Duke Power cheaper than Duke Power can actually generate it.
Correct.
First question I had in my mind, I went home, I said, gee, how come Duke Power's not putting up all these solar farms? Any idea why they would say, well, heck, it's only money, we don't want to make money? Why would they not do that if they could come out like a bandit, putting those farms up instead of you doing it?
Yeah, I mean, in part, I think it's easier for them to get the final product and not have to worry about these sorts of meetings. It's a lot of legwork going into these. It's a lot of approvals. They certainly do own solar farms in North Carolina. You know, they own one here in Union County. The one on South Rocky River Road is a Duke Power-owned solar farm. So it's not as if no solar farms in the state are owned by North Carolina. But I would say that it was a little bit of a compromise at the legislative level where Duke, as you may know, has a regulated monopoly on the state. We cannot sell you electricity, so they have a captive market. And really, because they have a captive market, they don't need to go out and do the work because all the work comes to them just as a matter of, the regulatory framework.
Are you telling me because of solar farms, my utility bill is smaller?
No, I mean, I would agree with the characterization that Mr. Terrell applied here, that we are the lowest cost energy in the market. However, the overall blended cost of Duke's production is subject to a number of forces, and we are certainly a downward pressure on that, but whether they choose to pass on energy cost savings to you as a consumer is not up to us. That's done by Duke and the Utilities Commission.
Would you say that my energy costs, or anybody's energy costs, is less because of solar farms? I don't mean yours in particular, in general. You know the industry, obviously, you're representing it.
Sure.
Are we getting more kilowatts for our dollar because of these farms, or is it all the same?
Yes, inherently we are, because as the mix of solar energy rises across Duke's portfolio, and it being the lowest cost energy of the market, you are getting less energy, or excuse me, a lower cost energy. Again, whether or not those savings are passed on to you, that's not, that's Duke's, yeah, that's Duke's concern.
Am I paying less for my electricity because of these solar farms, or is it the same? Is the question I'm asking you. As a citizen sitting here, and all the rest of you people, if you want to approve this thing, and there's going to be a whole lot of stuff going up there, and what do we get out of it? Well, you don't get anything, sir, but we do, because you get a government subsidy. And Duke Power has got to buy your electricity, we know that as well. And I also know that this is the first time I've seen a solar farm go up where you even go so far as to say, we sell about a kilowatt, and we can use electric motors powered by the sun to move those panels directly against the sun and get more kilowatts per day. Mm-hmm. So we get more money from Duke Power. But as a John Q. citizen, it don't mean nothing to me. It's strictly but between you and what you can do in your government subsidy. And I would question, what does the citizen get out of this? I see the panels will be up there, yes, without a doubt. But I don't see y'all saying, hey, and also Duke Power has got to have the same capacity whether you're there or not, because when the sun goes down, you can't produce any electricity. So they've got to have that capacity 24 hours a day regardless. I don't see one solar farm saying, sir, we need to put a whole bunch of batteries here and store some energy so we can give Duke Power a consistent supply of power, and that will reduce the need for their generation system. I don't see that. All I see is this is a parasitic industry as I look at it. You produce electricity, but it's not required, because Duke Power has said, we can make it, but if it don't work today, you got to make it yourself. And well, yeah, fine, we'll have the capacity. Well, what is the purpose of doing this? I can't see. That's my 2 cents.
I mean, yes. Look, we are providing an essential service at a cost lower than any other one can provide it in the industry. And, that is a free market principle that holds that this is competitive. It is more cost effective to construct and operate a new solar farm than it is to continue to operate some of the legacy assets that Duke does across the state. So it's in their economic interest to buy power from solar farms. The subsidies argument, we are the beneficiary of a tax credit at the federal level. Other than that, there is no subsidy, to my knowledge, anywhere else in the industry, and that subsidy is akin to what many other industries in this country do, from land use and farming to oil and gas to, you name it. And so I don't see us as being treated any differently than anyone else. There is a certain baseline load that solar does service, absolutely. You're correct that there has to be a certain amount of capacity that Duke has to offer, so that every time I turn on the lights, they come on, and I want that just as much as everybody else. And it's up to Duke to flow the energy and tune the rest of their assets to ensure that that is the case. And they do a pretty good job of it, because as the generation mix has included more solar, that amount of electricity has remained quite constant in North Carolina. I understand the frustration that the energy costs continue to go up. I'm also a Duke Energy customer, and I certainly wish that being in the industry, I could affect lower power bills at my house. But unfortunately, that is simply out of my hands. That is up to the Utilities Commission and Duke Energy, and they've not seen fit to lower the costs. And so, unfortunately, that's a frustration that should not be laid at the foot of the, solar industry, as we're doing everything that we can to lower the cost of energy in the state. But, to date, we haven't had enough of an impact to further lower that cost. Just because we are not including solar battery storage in this site doesn't mean that it is not being deployed elsewhere in the state. It is, and I think over the years to come, you will see increasing amounts of battery storage. But even that is a function of the rates that are paid by Duke Energy for the electricity. And so, it's pure economics whether or not they're profitable to deploy. And as the cost curves continue to come down on batteries, you will see more and more of them. But right now, they're not there, and so that's why they're not included in this project, is we can only work with the technology at hand. And yeah, I mean,
Okay, but I can't assume that Duke Power has a requirement to have the ability to generate as much power as required, with or without that solar farm makes no difference. They have got to have it regardless of whether they are not. So that solar farm will have no effect on the reduction of capacity that Duke Power has. Is that correct?
they have an open, what's called a request for proposal, where they solicit bids for renewable energy. This is, their desire to pay for renewable energy, and, we hope that this project will be one that's awarded in that request for proposal due to a number of factors, including the infrastructure availability here, the cost that we can generate the electricity at relative to other projects, its proximity to load. These are all benefits to the utility, and having distributed generation adds quite a bit of resilience to the grid in a way that has not previously existed under the previous or more legacy asset allocation.
Now, will we see someone from Duke Power singing in praise of this?
Sure, yeah, Lynn Good, their CEO,
Will
yes.
be in the meeting?
No, but you simply need to look at her comments to see.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, any other questions?
Any further questions for the speaker? Thank you,
Thank you
sir.
for your time.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am Logan Secord. I'm here representing Pine Gate. I just wanted to address two of your questions. So your first question is, why doesn't Duke do it themselves? So I would refer, there was a bill that was passed and approved negotiating between North Carolina stakeholders, the solar industry, and Duke that was passed last year, and it essentially came up with a balance, about 45-55. So Duke is going to do 55%, and then the solar industry, independent power producers, can do 45%. There's also a provision in there that's, it doesn't say Duke has to build the 55, it has an option for build own transfer. The reality is that Duke is a utility. They're not a developer, they're not an EPC. So we can do things better. We are much better. I have worked, even before I worked for Pine Gate, one of my specialties was utilities would come to us and they'd say, look, we want to own our assets because then they can rate base it, right? It's perfect for them, but they're not good at it. They don't know how to do it as well as we can do it. So it is an option, right? And Duke is actually considering this a lot of, they know their weaknesses and they want that rate base, so there's going to be a lot of opportunity for them to do that, but we often do it a lot better. So there is going to be that mix, and that is in legislation. The second thing was the base load. I think the base load is a little bit of about a 15-year-old myth. So it used to be that you had kind of standard load going throughout the day, a mix of coal and nuclear. But with the advent of natural gas, that actually changed the game. You see, coal and nuclear can't ramp up and can't ramp down very well. And your daily supply, what you need of electricity, changes throughout the day. So it's very expensive to have a coal plant running really low all day, and then when you get home, you turn on the lights, you turn on your AC, you start cooking meals for the family, right? The electricity skyrockets. Nuclear and coal can't do that, but gas can. So they've been changing to a more versatile mix where you have gas plants and solar plants that are working together in a more flexible movement. And yes, there are definitely going to be solar and storage projects. We're working on developing those right now. In this particular need for what Duke wants right now, they don't want for this RFP solar and storage. They just want solar. And you can see that they want this because they originally agreed that there's going to be about 300 megawatts across North Carolina in this latest RFP. Well, they realized last year it's more economical to do more solar and less coal. They had increased ahead of schedule, ahead of requirements. They said, look, these coal plants are too expensive to keep operating. They doubled. They went from 300 to 600 megawatts of solar for the RFP this month. We literally don't have enough solar to sell them. I wish I had another 5 because I could, you know, bid another 5 into this and still there'd be more than enough for everybody. So the reality is that Duke is moving to a more versatile grid, right? Coal is gone. Coal's not gone because of subsidies. Coal is gone because it's uneconomical, and it's better to have a mix of solar and versatile assets that can move with the way we live in the modern day. Does that help with the two questions of, you know, why they're not doing themselves and why, you know, the idea of baseload generation? Okay. Thank you, guys. Next, I'll bring up Mr. Kuhn, who will talk in detail about the vegetative buffer and how we think it can help.
Thank you.
Yes. Good evening. The landscape buffer for Blue Star was something that we really wanted to take a close look at with the importance of screening. And the idea here is really to build on a couple important elements here. One is the idea of balancing species that are native, that can also be drought tolerant and will survive for a long period of time in the setting. We also went out to the site, looked at the species that are growing in the area already, and really took a mixture of those types of species as a recommendation for the buffers around the entire site. We also included a mix of recommendations for pollinator wildflower mix as well as perennial grass mix for the buffer areas. This would be a sustainable approach to maintaining the buffer areas for the landscaping. When looking at the particular areas adjacent to what's shown as number 3 on this map and what you see on the screen here in regards to the difference between berms and the buffer itself, we looked at the options of how that impacts the overall storm water flow across the site as well. And that was a significant factor in considering those impacts to this and the long-term success of the landscape buffer. When landscape is placed on berms, as they're raised up above the surrounding elevation, the landscape has a tendency to have a lower survival rate as they tend to dry out quicker. And that really stresses those plants and really reduces the long-term success of that. In addition, because of the elevation of the site, particularly in this location, the flow of the stormwater and would be from the adjacent properties onto the site. And we would need to have some of that buffer area so that we could have swales, and that would reduce some of that space that really could be planted. It would need to be maintained clear of vegetation so that the stormwater could flow in swales. So that would actually reduce that and have a minimization to the effect of the overall view of that buffer. So we recommended a buffer here that is, as Tom noted, several times more than the requirements here in terms of a mix of both deciduous canopy trees as well as evergreen trees to really have that blend into the surrounding environment versus a wall of just continuous conifer or evergreen trees that would really bring it out of context to the surrounding areas. In this case, you can see a mix of the vegetation in this rendering that shows the shrubs, which would be evergreen, as well as at least 50% mixture of evergreens in the overall trees as well. And also the mix of the wildflower and perennial grass landscaping for the buffer areas. With that, I'd like to see if there's any questions in regards to the landscape buffering.
Yeah, one question real quick, and I'm not sure you're the appropriate one to answer, but I know there is a landscape bond that will be on here to ensure that trees are replaced as they may die off. How long is this bond proposed to be in place?
We can do it for the lifetime of the farm. That's fine.
Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant at this time?
I have one more on something really good at describing that. As far as the wildlife that's around, I don't know, obviously I'm not the expert, you are. Have there been any studies on, we're talking about the trees and stuff, but there's a lot of wildlife, obviously, in the country as well. Does that seem to impact the deer? Because I know there's wetlands and stuff there. Obviously, you're not going to put the panels on the water, but I'm just curious, in your experience, has there been any studies on, does it impact the flow of the wildlife in the area?
There's certainly consideration into wildlife, into the sites. In this case, with the number of wetlands that really kind of bisect the site, this really allows for the wildlife to be able to flow across the sites. And there are some locations, it's a matter of having this large buffer around the site as well that really allows wildlife to have upwards of 200 feet around the panel areas as well to transverse around the site. Mm-hmm.
Any further questions for the applicant at this time?
I could just
Thank
add
you.
one clarifying point. Thank you, Nick. Pine Gate is the only company that I'm aware of that builds what is called wildlife permeable fencing. It is a type of fencing that was designed with the North Carolina Wildlife Federation so that most animals, except for the largest ones, can get through. Even a small fox or medium-sized fox can get through the type of fencing that they put around their facilities. This enables wildlife to get through to their traditional food habitats, to their to places where they mate. And with the corridors that are left where the streams are, a lot of that wildlife is going to be protected. What really takes away from wildlife is not a solar farm, because they can get through. It's subdivisions. And in a lot of cases, people don't like to hear this, but it's also farms. Farms take away what is the natural habitat and put something in its place, like just grass, for example, for grazing animals. For what they're doing, though, it's about as animal and nature friendly as you can get.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
At this time, I'd like to open it up for public comment. I noticed we had some late arrivals. Is there anyone else that is not on this list at this time that wishes to speak this evening that has not signed up? Thank you. That being said, to call our first speaker, Representative Mark Brody. Good evening, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Mark Brody. I live at 5315 South Rocky River Road, and I'm speaking in opposition to this plan. I want to start out by saying I don't know these people, and I have...
You're speaking as a citizen.
I'm speaking as a citizen, yes.
Okay, you want to
I've got
clarify
that in here.
for the record.
Yeah, for the
He's not
record. I'm speaking as a
member.
citizen, not as a legislative...
Thank you.
Although I can't deny myself the fact that I have an experience at a legislator. But I don't know these people, so I really have nothing against these people in particular. I oppose all solar farms, and I've done that ever since I can remember that we started doing this back in 2007 when we passed Senate Bill 3. I only have 3 minutes, and thank you for some of the really interesting questions. But I've listened to fallacies. I've listened to half-truths, twisting the legislative intent, as well as stumbling through some of these answers to get their point across in their belief. So I'm going to point, I got 5 areas. I'm going to go real quickly until my signal comes, and I respect the 3 minutes that you have. Although if I'm a legislator and somebody comes in and sells me something, I get all the time I want to question. Here I only have 3 minutes, which with respect to the process. I believe I'm here to represent thousands of Union County voters who feel that the solar farm industry in North Carolina is abusing them by paying tax subsidies in the form of federalized subsidies from federal taxpayers, rate increases to support profit margins of companies that could not stand on their own without them, and sweetheart property tax breaks. Gentleman mentioned tax breaks. Are you aware that they get an 80% tax break on their property on their personal property tax. Are you aware of that? Doesn't go to the county. Anyways, and I'm opposed to this. Currently, North Carolina has over 100,000 acres of former farmland and solar farms. Recent bill, House Bill 951, which is the energy bill, which I opposed, authorized another 2,660 megawatts of additional solar farms. To put that in perspective, and you got to listen to this, according to the National Renewable Energy Commission, it takes 4 to 6 acres of land to produce 1 megawatt of solar energy. That's in desert land, like Arizona and California. With North Carolina, with its unique topography, it will take 10 to 12 acres. Multiply, do the math. That's 27,000 additional acres. Now let's put this all in major perspective. North Carolina has $1.8 million of agricultural land. We now have over 100,000, or close to 5.5% to 6% of that has been reduced in order to do solar farms. That's a 5.5% reduction in agriculture production. The last thing, because I got my signal, is I wanted to question about the decommission process, and basically their information claims $171,000 for decommissioning, which they're not offering you. At least I couldn't see it in there. But if you extrapolate it out 40 years, what's $171,000 going to do? Thank you very much for your time.
Are there questions? Any questions for the
The only
gentleman?
question I would have would be a recommendation that if he plans to speak to the commissioners, that he has these facts and figures to them to look at before the meeting is started. I think it'd been more valuable if we'd had this and to the planning board and our planning department, where they could have sent this out ahead of time, where we could have seen what you've done. I mean, to me, it's just a bunch of stuff that you've thrown out there. No disrespect.
No, I understand.
No disrespect.
No disrespect
Because I had to
taken.
tell the
Right.
applicants of things like this, the last meeting that we had.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? We need to have it where we can see it, follow along, digest it, and understand it. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, are you allowed to respond to that, or?
Yes,
Just
sir.
basically, if you decide to put this on hold for next month's meeting, I will have that information for you, plus a lot of others, so we'll leave it at that.
Louis, you had a question?
Matter of fact, I was going to say the same thing. You brought up a significant number of things, and there's some of the things that I'm hearing, that it's not ringing true to me. But I can't make an argument because I don't know both sides of the story. At least I can't take a look at different things and make a judgment. So, yeah, I would say yes, I'd prefer to put this thing off and let us get a case on both sides, so we can then make a confident judgment, rather than have somebody spend 30, 40 minutes up here presenting their stuff, then allow us 3 minutes for the other side. It doesn't seem like it's fair.
We do have some additional speakers, just for what that's worth. I do have some questions, if you don't mind. You say there are federal tax subsidies involved with this. Are there any state or local subsidies involved?
Other than the property tax, or personal property tax subsidies, no.
Okay, and the personal property tax, that is on the equipment itself, correct? Not on the land?
That's correct. They'll pay the, now, I got briefed on this before I got here, so I had to get as much information as possible in a very short time. But they'll pay the property tax on the value of the land. More than likely, it's probably what it is now. The personal property tax is a tax on the value of the machinery, et cetera, whatever they call it, the improvements to the property. That's the personal property tax. Now, several years ago, we had a bill in legislature that wanted to raise that from 20%, they get an 80% discount, 20% tax rate to 40%. We could not get that through. And I'm not going to speculate here about the reasons why, but I'm sure you can probably imagine. So, yeah, those are the tax breaks that there are out there.
Thank you. Any
And
further?
in addition to the rate, the blended rate for solar. Now, the gentleman said they have the lowest form of energy. Now, I would differ to that, but I can bring facts and figures. But interesting enough, I'll give you just a kind of an analogy. If that was true, Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, California, Western Washington, as well as the rest of the world would have solar up. They don't. They don't have that. There is a reason why they don't do that. If, like he said, this is free market. It's not a free market, folks. It's not a free market.
Do you have any questions? All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Next on the list,
May I have a moment to respond to the concerns, to elaborate?
let's get through the public comment, and we'll give you an opportunity to address that. Next is going to be David Caskey. Okay, Pam Caskey then. Just please state your address and whether you're speaking for or against this proposal.
Good evening. My name is Pam Caskey, and this is a very emotional issue for us. There are actually 6 members from Terra Drive, raise your hands, that are concerned. You know, energy is vital, and it's a challenge for our future. And I know we're going to need it, and it's going to be a shortage. But kind of with progress, it has a cost. Maybe to our quality of life in a community that we love. This solar farm is being presented in the footprints of Parkwood High School, Parkwood Middle School, and Prospect Elementary. Right now, the picture that he had up in the upper right-hand corner a while ago is in my backyard. We overlook a pasture of cows and woodlands, which is why we bought in this area. I've lived in Parkwood for 40 years, and I won't tell you how long I've been a native of Union County. You can guess that on your own. There are concerns amongst us in which they've addressed some of those, but it horrifies me to ride down Rocky River Road and see the solar farm there. I hope that you can address that at some point or with the county commissioners in the future. I have 2 grandchildren that live with me. A 4-year-old and an 18-month-old child. They can't wait to run out to the pasture to talk to the cows. What's it going to look like to them in their future? Worried about the natural areas. I appreciate their improvements. So I would like to address the property values. I know as a real estate agent myself that you can do analysis by paralysis sometimes. I did have an opportunity to work at the front of our neighborhood with a home that was for sale, that I was trying to sell. Just because of the power line that stretches across the front of Terra Drive, probably more than 50% of the people that came to see that home were not interested. How's that one power line versus a complete solar farm? There has to be more areas that are not in as populated areas for solar farms. I know we're going to need them, but couldn't they be somewhere else? Maples, we do love. Absolutely no gumball trees from some of the gentlemen. You know, we struggle with this a little bit. It's kind of like the lesser of 2 evils. And I appreciate the farmers that need to get more value and productivity from their land. We had land that didn't perk. So I am impacted by that as well. You know, do you look at, in the future, a housing development, or do you look at certain solar farms? You know, you talk about the response. It's kind of a seems to be an orchestrated timing during the holidays and Christmas when people are impacted by COVID and staying home and wearing masks and being afraid to go out. I'm sure there would have been more people here. I wasn't able to attend the last meeting. But I do thank you for your consideration and helping giving us a community in Union County that we can all be proud of.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank
Caskey.
you very much.
And that concludes the public comment portion. If the applicant would like to come back forward to address that, I also have a question for the applicant.
I just want to say thank you both for coming up to speak. Pine Gate, we're a community partner, okay? My job's not to come in and bulldoze people. I don't want that, right? We want to work with you guys. We worked with the community meetings. We expanded the buffers and everything, right? And if there's continued concern, we want to work with you. We want to be a partner. So I want to address a few concerns that were brought up here. So first of all, it was suggested that we're not telling the truth, that we're the lowest cost of energy. So this project is what's called a FERC qualifying facility. That means it is legally being sold at the lowest cost energy. Now, the accusation was, if it was truly that, wouldn't they have it in Arizona and Nevada? Well, before I worked for Pine Gate, I worked for NextEra Energy. I had over 1,000 megawatts in Arizona and 3,000 megawatts in Nevada, none of which were for QFs. They were all competitive bids that were all moving forward. So I can tell you, absolutely, they are moving as fast as they can. So I want to highlight that, yes, we are as competitive as can be. I want to bring up the concern on the land. And I'm going to be honest, it's a hard time to be a farmer. Okay? A lot of landowners can't afford to keep that land in their family. This particular solar farm is an example, right? We are giving an option that that land can stay in that family, can provide guaranteed revenue to that family in drought, in storm, in anything. Okay, we're not taking fertile land, right? We're not coming in and saying you have to do this. We're saying, would you like to do this? We can offer you. The reason it's a solar farm, right? It's not a farm. It's a production plant. It's a solar farm because it just so happened that farmers want to do this. To address that same exact concern, this isn't an option between a pristine field and a solar farm anymore, right? As was said in the last hearing, this land will be put to other use, right? That land, some of the landowners came up and spoke, it will be sold, and it won't be sold to somebody who will have a 200-foot setback and who will have a 50-foot forest planted and offering to plant it early to make sure. So to compare this to what it is right now is a fallacy. So it needs to be considered in the context of what it really will be. We think we're the lowest impact. You can't see it, you can't hear it, you can't, there's no traffic. To clarify, I had somebody go out with a decimal meter and I said, go stand in front of our solar farm with the exact same design as this one and give me the readings at 1 foot, 5 foot, and back to 50 foot. And there's no audible sound there. And to address the last comment, there was concern that we're being subsidized, that you guys aren't getting any benefit. I want to re-highlight the original presentation. We are increasing the property taxes from over the lifetime of this project. I think it was maybe a 10-fold increase. We went from something like $200,000 in property taxes to the county. With this solar farm, it'll go up to nearly $2 million. So you're not comparing it to some fake number that doesn't exist.
And that's
right?
after the 80% rebate?
That's after the 80% rebate.
Thank you.
To compare it to something that doesn't exist, right? You won't ever see an 80% on what? Because if it's not a solar farm, you won't get any of that additional $1.8 million. If it's not a solar farm, it will be some other subdivision, and you still won't see that benefit. So to compare an 80%, that's a fake number. What is a real number is the dollars that you will get with the solar farm that you won't get from another use. And lastly, I understand the concerns, and we want to continue to work with you, but we held 2 community meetings, one in person and one virtual, for the concern of COVID. With the December hearing, we continued to work with you, with the single landowner who came up to address the concern, and we came back. We brought on Kimley Horn to do additional analysis. I spun up a dozen people Wednesday morning, and I said, I want to know every aspect of this option because it has never come up in any project. And more came up here, and we believe we've addressed all their concerns, but to continue to delay this rezoning, and remembering that there is the Board of County Commissioners that will meet February 7th to review this, and then again, I believe February 21st for the actual decision. We want to work with you guys, but to continue to delay, what's to prevent somebody else from coming again, next month, and the next month, and the next month, and at some point, this project becomes infeasible, and then we've done, as we said, paralysis by analysis, and we've lost a good thing. We want to work with you guys, and if there's conditions that you guys want to bring up that you'd like us to have before the Board of County Commissioners, please let us know. I will, first thing tomorrow morning, spin up the resources. Let's evaluate. Let's continue to work together, but to continue to delay as more and more people bring up the discussion, it's unrealistic. And now I'll open, I believe I answered your questions, but if there's anything I can do to answer questions or any of the team members here, I'm happy to assist.
Any further questions for the applicant at this time? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, everybody.
This time, I'd like to open this for discussion among the board. Before we get started on that, I'd like to ask a question for either Bjorn or Lee regarding the procedural rules. I believe since this was deferred once, it can go before the board regardless based on the time frame. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So if we choose to defer again, it's still going before the board. So I just wanted to make that clear to everyone before we begin deliberations.
If the choice of the planning board was to defer it again, I think we've had that happen maybe one time before, and we asked the applicant what they wanted to do. It's not an automatic. Board of Commissioners, it can go to the Board of Commissioners, but if the applicant told us they wanted to come back, then we would bring it back. So,
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions or clarifications they require from Lee at this time regarding the procedures of the rules?
No, I understand it.
All right. I'd like to open it for discussion among the boards.
Mr. Chair, I don't think we can defer it, but I would make a comment, because they have the right to take it on forward, okay? I would say that if the accusations are going to be made by Mr. Brody, he needs to come prepared with facts and figures to get in front of the commissioners to look at, for them to think about a week to 2 weeks before they have that meeting, so they can dig into it, analyze, work with the planning department, et cetera, et cetera. But to come here, with all due respect, tonight, and then have what we had last time, when we had things thrown at us that were opinions, no substance, like we've got answers to tonight that have been brought back to us. And I appreciate the job that the applicant has done getting our answers to the questions that we had. But I think that anybody else that's got anything against it is going to have to come prepared and not have hearsay to our commissioners, because that's not fair to them. and I want to go on record as saying that. I respect the rest of the members, just how they feel, but I think that to just put it off another time, that's kicking a can down the road.
Thank you, Vice Chair Fisher. Louis?
Well, I appreciate what he said, and I agree with to some part of it. But I would like for this board to do its job, okay? And when I'm sitting here, and I've heard a presentation from a lengthy presentation from the pros to put this thing up here. And I have a lot of questions that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And Mr. Brody has obviously done some serious research on the thing, but he was limited to 3 minutes. So it's kind of hard to make a presentation. What I would see if we can do this thing, I would like to see if Mr. Brody, if he is hell bent on showing us what this thing is, come back here and make a presentation. So you got these people, they get their side, and he presents the opposite side, and we can sit here and judge with the facts from both sides. Then if one of them makes a lousy presentation, they lose. But I don't think we're capable of making a proper decision now, because we don't know both sides of every issue here. So we kind of guessing, and I'd rather not guess. I'd rather not make a decision at all. If I had to guess, I'd like to have a fair and reasonable discussion with a pro and con on both sides, with equal strength to do the job. Then we can decide from there. And that's my recommendation. And you can see if you're interested, and if Mr. Brody says he'd do it, I would ask we do that. Okay?
Further discussion? Anyone else? Pam?
Maybe I'm going maybe beyond this, but unfortunately, the source of our issues here in Union County in development is changing, okay? So I think it is coming down to, do we put a development, a subdivision, or we gotta find another way of creating a balance, be that, or be commercial, industrial, whatever that is. I don't think we in Union County have really created a way by which we can do that the best for everyone. And I think what's happening is our choices are limited here as a planning board. And I do agree with the applicants and other people have said that the farmers, we're losing the farmers. And Union County is not doing a good job of finding the right way to preserve that property. So in this situation, as you look at, do I want to see another 1,000 homes along Rocky River Road? Hell no. Do I want to see a solar farm? I heard that woman. I'm feeling the same pinch where I live. But it comes to a point with where is the balance and what is the best for our area? And yes, did we get all the information? Perhaps we didn't. But even if we do defer it, it still goes in front of the commissioners. I think we have to consider, do we want another development or do we want something different that will preserve the farmers? The good news is when I read to see who owns these properties, for once, they're all from North Carolina. They're not from California, they're not from Georgia, they're not from Texas, they're actually from North Carolina. I want to support those people. So I'm at a point where I'm very conflicted. But if we had to decide today without having to push it, I would have to vote for the solar farm because I would actually rather see a solar farm than a development. And I do hurt for the neighbors that have to look at that. Hence why I said, you're going to lose leaves on those trees. You're still going to see that solar farm. What about the wildlife? But at the end of the day, 1,000 homes with all the other traffic, do we really need that? That's my opinion.
Thank you, Pam.
I want to echo the comments from Vice Chairman Fisher and Ms. Duda. I think they're well said. I think it's a good project considering it's that or something's going to get built there. And that's going to put pressure on the schools, put pressure on the sewer system, pressure on the water system. This is environmentally friendly. It's allowing for wildlife. It's allowing for the floodplain measures to go through. I think they've met the expectations of what the property people wanted, which was to not see it. I do see what Ms. Duda is saying about when the leaves fall off the trees, but they've gone and met that concern that the residents have. And so for me, I support the project.
Thank you. Charlie?
I'd have to ditto Pam's comments too. I own quite a bit of farmland. My people have been in this county for 4 generations. They came here as farmers, and that's what I do now. And I also sell farm equipment. Some of my customers are right next door to this project. It's going to be a net increase in tax revenue for the county if this would come in. But again, it's like Pam says, it's pick your poison, if it is such a thing. Because probably the most money that this family could get from that property would not be to put it into a solar farm, but to sell it as residential property. And then you get everything that comes along with residential property. I happen to be a residential property. I'm a lot of trouble to some people. And so more me means more interesting things. I have to caution people about not putting their children's dirt bikes and their ATVs that they get at Christmas time on our property that joins residential sections. So I don't own an ATV. I don't own a dirt bike. I bet they're fun, but they're a lot of trouble. And you get that from people. And so I think there needs to be a mix. I think the family that owns this property is trying to do their very best while looking after all of their family members to make sure that they get them taken care of with the property that they've sat on for years and years, got very little income from. And of their choices, this one's pretty benign. These folks have addressed the buffering issue around the residential areas. I don't understand why that wasn't addressed to begin with, but at least they have addressed it. It's probably about as good as they can do. It's not as good as looking at a picturesque scene of a cow in a pasture, but that cow's not going to be there much longer. And so either way, if this doesn't go through, it's probably going to be a residential thing, and that cow's going to be gone. So it may not be very pleasant yet, but I'd much rather look at the berm than look at somebody's backyard.
Thank you, Charlie. Christopher?
I was ready to go through the last time.
Mr. Chair, may I
Sir.
clarify one thing? So if, and I want to do this before you decide to vote, if you did decide to not take action tonight, what we would do is, again, we would reach out to the applicant, find out what they wanted to do. Of course, you could ask them tonight. They may be prepared to answer that question tonight. We would reach out to them and ask them if they wanted to come back to the planning board or go forward to the board of commissioners. However, the ordinance says the board at that point may take action. So they don't necessarily have to. We've only ever had that happen one other time. We did put it on the board's agenda, and the board at that time said, we're not going to take action, we're going to remand it back to the planning board for recommendations. So that is an option that the board of commissioners does have. If they chose to move forward, they could send it back. I wanted to clarify that because I didn't say it before.
Thank you for the clarification.
Can I ask one question?
Yes, ma'am.
So, I don't know who's here in representative of the applicant then, but may I ask why you didn't go for development? Why you did solar farm? I know you've got a lot of wetlands on the properties across the farmland, and I know when you have wetlands, it's hard to develop in full scale, but why did you go in solar farm? Why didn't you go another development? You could have made millions and zillions of dollars. So I need to understand why a solar farm?
You want me to come up here?
Sure, please.
My name's Stan Purser. My brother and I own this property. We own probably the biggest part, 35%, 209 acres. My parents were born and raised here. I got a lot of relatives still here. My Uncle Clayton was a principal at Parkwood High. We wanted to keep the property in the family. And it just makes sense. I mean, we could have an income stream, maybe develop it 40 years. I won't be here to do it, but my children might, my grandchildren might. So that's the reason we just thought it was in the best interest. We were in the fuel business, Purser Oil Company, before we sold out, and we did a lot of business with developments, but I saw what that did too. Somebody mentioned about it's going to put a burden on your utility department. You've already said you're going to get more income from the taxes here, but for us, it was just reasonable because we wanted to pass a legacy down. That's what my mother and dad did for us. Thank you.
Thank you. My comments on the matter, first off, personally, I'm not a huge fan of solar, not a huge fan of ethanol, anything that requires any subsidy, federal or otherwise. I'm a firm believer in the open market. That being said, the subsidies are federal in nature. They will be assigned, whether they are here or somewhere else. The point about the personal property tax, yeah, I'd like to have more than 20%. However, those are the rules, and that still nets more than what you currently have. And if you develop this as residential, I feel as though after you factored in what comes in versus what goes out to pay for infrastructure improvements, schools, roads, you name it, it would be a loss. So to that point, I think this is the best use given that. To address another concern, I'd like to echo Vice Chairman Fisher's point. Representative Brody, I know he laments 3 minutes of talk time here. I would note that this has been deferred once, and no one was present to make those points. There's also, as Vice Chairman Fisher mentioned, no advanced indication of any of these points. We had no letters, emails, any correspondence of that nature prior to tonight's meeting. So, in my opinion, that ship has sailed. I'd like to echo the points of the remainder of the board. While this may not be ideal for a lot of folks, and I understand as a neighbor, I understand the other ramifications, but we're not going to kick this can down the road. I support it.
And I will say that I will yield to the collective wisdom of my fellow board members, because it looks like everybody's for it except me, and I will vote for to make it unanimous, because collectively, there's for 60 you guys are all in agreement, and I'm not, so I have to take it that you're right and I'm wrong. So.
There's no obligation to vote with the crowd.
Absolutely.
But I still will,
Your opinion is highly, highly respected.
Thank you, sir, appreciate that.
I mean that.
Well,
And as a side point, Charlie, we were talking about land being in the family, and we heard Mr. Purser say that. My wife's great-granddad lost his farm for reasoning due to economics way back there, and guess what's on that farm today? If he'd have kept it, Schaumburg, Illinois, in the airport. So you never know what's going to happen.
All this being said, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion that that it be approved.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Brings up the next item, rezoning case ZZ 2021-008, Crane. Bjorn?
Evening, members of the board. This is a rezoning request. It's actually RZ. I know in your agenda it shows CZ. The difference is important because this is a straight rezoning, not a conditional rezoning. 2021-008. It's called the Crane rezoning because it's on Crane Road. This is a request to rezone a parcel from R40 to R15 to allow it to be split into 2 lots. This is a straight rezoning. There are no conditions associated with it. The existing conditions on Crane Road, this is the existing view. There is 1 house on the site. There's vacant portion to the southern portion of it that would be split into 2. It could be split into 2 if this rezoning were approved. It's looking south on Crane Road, looking north on Crane Road, residential area, some single-family fronting directly on Crane, some subdivisions without direct access on Crane Road, with the homes without direct access. This is the, I wouldn't call it a site plan, but it is a site plan. It shows the parcel and how it is feasible to split it into 2 and meet the R15 zoning standards. It would require sewer to support this. Water's already along Crane Road. Sewer would have to be extended from the south. That would be complicated to do, but sewer does exist in the area. In terms of nearby municipalities, the parcel is right here, and Weddington is to the east, but not immediately adjacent. In terms of development status, you can see a lot of single-family residential lots in the area. Some parcels are undeveloped, but generally it's a lot of subdivision lots. In terms of environmental features, there's no wetlands or streams on the site itself. Zoning, a lot of R40 or R20 to the north where a subdivision occurred. In terms of transportation, the most recent NCDOT count was from 4 years ago. It was 5,100 cars per day. Closer to Ray Road, we put our own traffic counter out in December for about a week and a half, and the count was 6,100 cars a day, which over the course of 4 years to add 20% more cars is honestly right in line with what you would expect in this rapidly developing part of the county. There are no funded projects along Crane Road or the intersections leading to it. Land use plan, this area is recommended for single-family residential. And what that means in an area like this is if you have access to utilities, it's approximately 2 units per acre. That's not a hard and fast number. It's on a sliding scale with some sensitivity to proximity to commercial nodes or distance from developments and activity centers. In terms of public feedback, one person called to inquire about it, but didn't have an opinion for or against it, was just learning about it. There was no community meeting held because this wasn't a conditional rezoning. Staff report and recommendation. In terms of the negatives, the density is higher than what is recommended for the land use map. The parcel is 0.9 acres, but when you subtract out the right-of-way for Crane Road, it's significantly less than that. It's more like about 3/4 of an acre, and then you put 2 units on that, your density's over 2.5. Also, it sets a precedent for similar rezonings in the future. I can go back and show you the parcels along here that are really original properties from before all the subdivisions happened, and you could see more of that happening. People saying, well, this person got the rezoning, I want more, and you end up with a strip of density that's higher than what the plan would call for. So, what we say in the staff report is that if these parcels were to work together, we think there's something that could be developed that would be at higher densities than what's currently there, but it would be less than if every single house or every single lot just split in 2. Also, it would require a significant sewer extension to serve the property, so obviously the county's then maintaining a lot more pipe relative to the number of homes that are being served by that extension. The positive is it does provide additional flexibility to the property owner. It's not wildly out of line with existing development standards in the immediate area. It's just the density is too high and it sets a precedent. So based on that, our recommendation is for denial of this proposed rezoning. And I'm happy to answer any questions, and the applicant is here.
Any questions from Bjorn? Vice Chairman Fisher?
Bjorn, question. The planning department did an outstanding job preparing and taking the input on the 2050 comprehensive plan. You guys did a great job of all the people that you worked with around the county to bring that together. Was this discussed with the applicant at the time that he presented this to the planning department?
You mean on the land use recommendations for the area? Yeah, we told them that, you know, that you had a land use plan, the recommendation for single-family residential, that this was similar to the areas nearby, but it was a little dense. And the original intent was to go with R20, but because they lost so much land due to the road right-of-way, you know, at first glance, what looks like, oh yeah, you can cut that into two 20,000 square foot lots, and looks a lot more in line with the adjacent areas. Once you reduce that right-of-way, you're down to 15,000 square foot lots, and that's a different story.
Good. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Any other questions for Bjorn? At this time, I'd like to call the applicant. All right, good evening.
Good evening. My name is Dennis Dashenka. I'm a real estate agent representing the applicant. So I'll be real brief. It does look like the odds are kind of against us. It's a long shot, but I just want to give you kind of a background why we even asked for it. The applicant is a pretty successful businessman, but his business is not really in real estate, so lately he's had a pretty, big belief in real estate market with all the things that's going on. So he invested in this property, but it was pretty competitive market. So we spent a lot more than we thought, and this wasn't the original intent, but just by looking at how the house is sitting to the right of the lot, we did not necessarily need R20, needed R15, I'm sorry, but since we lost some to the right of way, we went to for the R15, but it's mainly to justify the price that we've got in this project, and we are, if approved, we would the use of this land would be to build similar home, which is about 1,300 square feet, maybe more, depending on what the building envelope will allow if this was to approve. So, and that was the intentions behind this.
You mentioned the right-of-way acquisition. Did that take place after the purchase of the property?
No.
So that was known condition?
Yeah, it was known condition.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant?
I have one. Was it considered also to demolish the existing structure and build a larger structure on the property and resell?
An option, that's something we had in mind. As of right now, we don't have the price, the numbers just did not make sense at the moment, so we did remodel the home. The home is completely changed. It's pretty much a new home. Just the outside is pretty much the same, but inside it's completely remodeled. But that could be also an option too. The sewer issue was addressed, and this home is currently sitting on a septic tank. I don't have the septic permit, but from what I could find out, it's a conventional system, so I'm assuming if this was allowed, we could possibly get a perk test done on the other half, if that's an option, since the sewer is not directly accessible.
So you'd stay with septic?
Mm-hmm.
If you could perk?
Yes.
Do you plan on, owner plan on living in this area?
No, it's their investment property, so yeah, it's not a primary residence.
Any other questions for the applicant at this time? Thank you. So at this time, I'd like to open up for public comment. I have no names on the list for public comment, so at this time, I would like to close public comment. This time, I'd like to encourage discussion amongst the board.
sitting there cutting one lot, which is probably the average size of a couple lots all in that whole area. To cut it in half, leave the precedent open for anybody else to cut a lot in half. And it looks like, you know, we were all business people here one way or the other. So the man made an investment, and he's trying to get the best yield he can out of it. I don't see giving it this way. I think it's gonna hurt too many people who live there already. And if he wants some advice on how to make a bad investment, I can show him one. I did that last year. No.
Vice Chairman Fisher.
Mr. Chair, I look at the staff report and recommendation, and I asked the question about the 2050 comp plan. The ink's not even dry on that. And we've got requests, like number 2, sets precedent in similar rezonings in the future. If we do it this, then the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and it throws the 2050 plan out the window after all of the, I don't know how many people in Union County contributed their time away from their work, their families, to work with the planning department and the county commissioners to put that plan together. And I think that we already know about the sewer and the water situation and where we stand on that. And I've got to be up front. I'll be the first to say it, unless I didn't hear you, Louis. But I would have to vote to deny this.
Pam? Robert?
Yeah, I agree with Vice Chairman Fisher. And besides that, just cutting that lot in half, it's just going to create a higher density in that area doesn't match. And then it does set a precedent, and then you're going to have that plan not work out. So.
Charlie? Christopher? I'm going to have to agree with Vice Chairman Fisher and Louis as well. To me, there was so much work put forth in the 2050 plan. This would just essentially negate all of that and create a precedent we don't necessarily want. So that being said, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion that the plan is presented to be denied.
Do we have a second? Robert? All in favor of denial? Thank you. That closes out our agenda items. It's now time for the planning staff report.
Wanted to give you an update on some action that the County Commission took last night on the 2050 comp plan regarding several strategies that were recommendations out of the plan, but need some details to actually implement. Could be changes to the ordinance, could be new programs, could be policies. And so what we did was present to the county commissioners to, again, recruit for a shorter period, only maybe a 6-month period, to work on these strategies with a group of residents. And so we opened that recruitment period up in November, closed it in mid-December, and made recommendations to the county commissioners. The 6 strategies that we're working on are the stormwater development standards, looking at upgrading our requirements and potentially other strategies to address stormwater on new development. School siting, currently we allow schools, public, private, charter, on any zoning district within the county. We don't have any minimum standards apart from what the school system might impose on itself for public schools, but for the private and charter, it's really just whatever the zoning standards are. Open space in rural areas, this is the concept of the areas of the comprehensive plan where it's recommended to remain rural residential, the dark green parts of the plan when you're looking at the map. You could still have major subdivisions happen that use up a lot of land, and it was roundly recognized that just 1-acre lot developments do not preserve rural character. It just turns into a lot of lawn. And so having a open space requirement as a part of that subdivision process is a strategy. You need to figure out what the details are. What percent, what kind of features do you look to preserve? Is it, mature tree stands? Is it wetlands? Is it additional stream buffers? Is it, setback from the road? So we're going to wrestle with those issues. The next one is cluster allowance in rural areas where utilities are present. This is the idea that if you have water and sewer available to properties for whatever reason, but it's recommended for rural residential, you give some flexibility to the property owners. Say you have a hypothetical 20-acre parcel, you could put 21-acre lots on it. That's inefficient for water and sewer lines, results in a lot of extra pipe. So potentially dropping the density down to maybe a quarter acre or half acre by right, and you can save the rest of the land, leave it in an undeveloped state. What are those lot sizes that are allowed? What's the minimum development size that this would apply to? This committee will work on those strategies. Litter task force, that's saying, we need to do more than just have people volunteer once a year to go pick up trash along a section of road. Are there enforcement strategies? Is there a need to potentially have, districts set up across the county to have trash pickup as opposed to just everyone having random chartered service for trash pickup, as well as, maybe helping to support additional volunteer groups, because that is an effective thing to do. That's what this committee is going to be looking at to formalize it, so it's not just Loretta burning herself out recruiting volunteers to pick up trash. And the last one's broadband internet. We all know what happened during COVID. It's not no longer just a nice thing to have. It's an essential thing to work in the modern world, and there are parts of this county, not just rural but also urban areas, where the service is lacking. A lot of money is flowing forth from state and federal sources, and potentially from county sources as well. And we need to figure out how we're going to partner with these private services to expand the service across the county. So based on that, we had 74 applicants. We initially proposed having 5 members per committee, but because we had so many good applicants, and also I think we realized you do get some attrition on these committees, we recommended bumping it up to 7, and that was supported by the county commissioners. Had about a 50-50 gender distribution, about 70% inside the municipalities, which is coincidentally about what it is for the county, so that's also in line with the overall county. And we had good geographic representation just based on the zip codes. So we took the committee lists and recommended based off of, first, their experience. Do they have technical experience in that area, or do they have organizational experience, like they've worked on a lot of committees, they've previously been an elected official or maybe an executive director of an organization. Just understand that you have to be a cooperative person to get things accomplished. And then also we looked at geographic dispersion. We also looked at gender balance. Not so much about the municipal yes or no, because honestly, by the time we balanced for all those other things, we just ran out of candidates. So these were the people who will be serving on the Stormwater Committee. Then you have the school setting requirements. Open space in rural areas. Charlie's on there. Cluster standards. Pam's on there. Litter task force recommendations. Archie again volunteered, so he was put on a committee. And Loretta, of course, is on a committee. Broadband Internet. There are 3 members from the 2050 plan process, including Pat Kale, the director of the Chamber of Commerce, and Alan Baucom, former commissioner. So county commissioners approved this list. We sent out the doodle polls today to the people who are on the committees to set up the first kickoff meeting, hopefully in the month of January, and we'll set up a monthly schedule. And if you want, we can provide an update to you at your monthly planning board meeting to let you know about the process and provide any feedback that you want to provide on this process. But this is really important. The commissioners are looking forward to the deliverables, and there's still a lot of goodwill towards the plan.
Bjorn, will
Yes,
each
sir.
one of these groups have a chair? Did I understand
They will, but that obviously hasn't been determined yet. They haven't met.
I don't know about the rest of the group, but I wouldn't mind if the chair of each one of those committees presented during the staff comments an update on that, or however the planning department decides to get it communicated to us. Y'all may just want to communicate it to the planning department,
If it's feasible,
whatever.
if it's feasible for them to come here. I know it's asking a lot to show
Yeah.
up once a month,
Yeah, I don't know.
but I do agree that I would love to see the regular updates.
Yeah, we're hoping to move pretty quickly with this. By summer, we hope to be complete with their work and take it to you and the county commissioners.
I know when y'all had some of the people that were headed up some of that stuff on the 2050, it was very impressive to hear it from their point of view when they presented it to us. I can't remember some of the names that the people, do y'all know what I'm talking about?
You mean like how Archie would come and present the results
Yeah.
to the commissioners?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, well, he has a great voice.
That was
People just
great
love to hear him
having
speak.
Is there a possibility, to Don's point, that maybe when it's all said and done, they could present for their individual committees?
You know,
We could request it?
I can't speak for them, but we'll certainly bring it up and ask them how they want to engage and, keep you and the commissioners up to speed.
Okay, no problem. Just a comment.
Sure. And that's all I have on this topic.
Could I
Thank
ask
you,
you, what happened with can you remind me what happened with the Rural Water Authority?
That was researched by Public Works and the legal department, and it was presented to the commissioners in October, November? About 2 months ago.
Yeah.
It was for information, and it's kind of in limbo. It wasn't a positive presentation. There's a lot of hurdles to it, specifically the selling of the water, based on the bonds that were sold for the Yadkin project. So, yeah, interbasin transfer of fund. Yeah, we can't, because we're the ones who are getting the water from the interbasin transfer. We can't then just go hand it off to someone else. There's some legitimate hurdles to making that a reality. So I honestly don't know what's going to happen with the commissioners, whether they're just going to do a pocket veto or whether they'll formally take action to do something. But it wasn't positive.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Bjorn. Any further staff comments, Lee?
Two quick things. One, rezonings. We had the presentation, a public hearing last night for the tower on Ray Road. So that decision will be forthcoming. I'm not sure exactly when that'll occur, but that decision will be soon, I think. And the other item I wanted to bring up was just for you guys to think about. I know our agenda packets are getting gigantic. I know that last month it was about 800 pages, I think, and this month, I'm not sure how many it was. I know it was a lot. What we wanted to do, I know in the past, they're on the internet. You can go download them, and we used to print those each meeting. I anticipate that because of development activity staying high, that these agenda packets probably will flex over time, but they likely won't get smaller. So we likely won't print those anymore to just hand them out to every board member. But we are working on a future solution to maybe have some iPads or something like that you can kind of have the agenda on in front of you while you're meeting. But in the meantime, if there's certain items that you particularly want, like if you just want a copy of the outline of the agenda, or maybe the agenda and some basic information like the application, maybe a site plan or something like that, just let Amy know, and we can have that ready for you on your desk when you get here. But unfortunately, it'll blow our budget out of the water if we print 900 pages for every board member for each meeting. So just be thinking about it, and next meeting, just let Amy know what you guys want, and that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, at this time, it's time for brief comments. So we'll start with you, Christopher.
I'm just curious, would this be cliff notes per case based on what you're recommending, just having a bridge cut down version of it?
I think what made these applications so, or these agenda packets so large were the real estate reports, and a lot of them, I know the tower company did a full construction drawing set for their site plan, which, I mean, we don't normally get that. So, I mean, if we have a meeting where, you know, the application packet's like 20 pages, I mean, that's probably something that we can put in. And it's probably basic information that you would want anyway. But yes, an abridged version would probably be something that didn't include some of those, you know, 100-page appraisal reports and you know, large full construction drawing sets and things like that.
Robert?
No comments. Good.
Charlie? Pam?
My problem is I'm overthinking something, so can I just say it out loud?
By all
Just
means.
bounce it off you guys? So after that solar farm, I struggled with that. I struggled with that decision. And the question I should have asked, and didn't. Because I did ask about the development, why did you develop? What I didn't ask, what was the topography of all the properties? Because I'm wondering, I was looking, I went back, there's a lot of wetlands, there's a lot of streams. So in 593 acres, all right, they probably still could have gotten 200, 300, whatever, you know, the RA, whatever. There still would have been some level of development. I'm a farming family, so I tend to bend that way when I hear that they want to keep it in the family. The one thing I did ask was the 40-year, and it goes back to that, which I think is a bonus for Union County, because who knows in 40 years what's going to happen. So I think I go back and I say, I think I made the right decision, but I don't know if I asked the right questions. Can you guys help me with that?
What? Can I answer that?
Anyone, by all means.
Just to say it bluntly,
Please do.
I thought you did a hell of a job. Okay? Being very honest with you. And I thought you asked some good questions, made some good points, and presented yourself extremely professionally. And I don't have a problem with anything you said, the way you did it, et cetera, so forth, so on. It was a hard one. Now, you weren't here at the last meeting, were you?
No, I wasn't.
We had one that got in to be a tearjerker too over the cell tower, right? That was brutal. Yeah, so I think all of us were in your seat at the last meeting. I mean, I don't know what's gonna happen. And we were, I figured Lee was gonna get up there and tell us that, well, this is what's gonna be the final answer, but he didn't. He keeps us in suspense for another month. But I thought you did a great job. Now, that's me personally. Louis?
I think you did fine. You did fine. As a matter of fact, now that we, I'll put the last guy up, what I would like to bring up is that's the whole solar farm thing. It's an invention by the federal government that's subsidizing and subsidizing and subsidizing. It's corporate welfare. I don't care how you slice it. And we had a gang of people up here with making a ton of money. And we had Mark Brody over here with about 3 minutes to go up here. What I said is, the same thing I was said earlier, we are not getting the information on both sides to make a rational decision, because the proponents were handing us, you know, the lawyers coming in, they're handing us a line. And I wouldn't say necessarily lying to me, but I think they might have been omitting a little truth and shading and stuff this way, and we couldn't get a fair thing on the other side. I don't know if we can do anything about that, but this thing on the solar panels, without a doubt, if you take a look at the information that came in from what they what they told us we should understand, and what the opposition had to say, the opposition didn't have a hell of a good chance. And I don't know what we can do about that, but it certainly would, you know, we would have been better off if we'd had more of the opposition being able to make a case and present evidence and that sort of thing. It would have been a better deal for us to make a decision on it. what we can do about it, you're the president, sir, you figure it out.
Yeah, you know, it's a good point. I mean, at the last meeting, we had a whole host of people who recognized the 3-minute limit, but what they did was they went up in succession and made their case with the cell tower. So they used the process for that. The only thing is that, you know, I wish Mr. Brody was here at the last meeting too, and I wish the other people were maybe here at the last meeting too. But, you know, we're already another month into it.
I agree. And the only point I'm trying to make is that we didn't get as much information as I would like us to have to make a rational decision. And if there's any way we can wiggle things around to make next time we get it, whether, you know, whether anybody's happy with it or not. If we get that information, we can make a rational decision.
Were you here when we did Chatsworth?
I don't know. Chatsworth.
Chatsworth.
Probably not.
That was very controversial. Providence rezoning. And I'm going to ask Lee and Bjorn to help me with this. But we had people coming in here and they were yelling at us, they were screaming at us, they were accusing us of being in the pockets of the commissioners and I don't know what all. And they eventually came back and they were represented by a lawyer and it calmed everything down and we got to the end result. And I don't know that we ever made anybody happy. And I would have felt better if they had had a lawyer talk about this, just like they had a lawyer talk about it. And the Homeowners Association of Chatsworth used Cox out of Waxhaw. It was a lawyer that came up and spoke. And she did a very good job explaining it. But I don't know. I was shocked when Brody got up there. And that just shocked me because I had no idea. I didn't recognize him at first. The last time he spoke was to our Rotary Club, and it was a similar presentation like that. And that's when I said what I said about bring us the facts, bring us the figures, do it ahead of time, don't do it at the drop of a stick. So, just for whatever it's worth.
Well, so
They're grown people. They knew the date. They had 2 chances. They didn't get together. It's a net gain tax-wise for the county. We didn't have, they didn't go to a development. It might be a farce to subsidize that stuff, but it's not our choosing. It's federal subsidy. And their power companies are obligated to buy that power if it's available to them. So I don't see that we did anything wrong. I like Pam's statement. I think she did a very diplomatic job. She saved me from being undiplomatic.
to address Pam's comment, I agree you did a heck of a job. And going back a few meetings, we had a case where there was cows that a gentleman wanted to keep on a small property. And if you recall, I had to bounce, I guess primarily between Pam and Vice Chairman Fisher and Charlie, because there's areas of expertise that are beyond my ability. So when I'm conflicted like that, oftentimes the answer lies within my peers. So that's one of my little secrets. To address Louis, first off, I don't want you or anyone else feeling like you have to agree with this board.
No, it's probably better if the county commissioners see that we didn't all agree, Louis.
Well, I don't know.
All we're doing is making
If there was any remote agreement to my point, I would have seen it. But I think I was right, and I think y'all were all wrong.
Okay.
However, when I have 6 people, take it completely. By the way, 6 people I have quite a bit of respect for. Okay, when every one of you unanimously thinks different than me, I start thinking, hey, I might be wrong here. I have been wrong before. I remember back 12 years ago, I made a mistake.
Please.
It doesn't hurt to see a dissenting vote in there, Louis.
It's not a thing. It's a question. Was my case correct?
I don't know if it's
It was in my heart.
right or wrong.
Yeah.
It's opinion.
Yeah, it's not dissenting.
That's
It's
all
was I right?
they got us here for.
That's why there's 7 of us.
That's it. we're doing, we're just trying to give them an opinion. Of course, we take a little bit of the heat off of them and calm them down a little bit before they get to the commissioners most times.
So,
That's okay.
if I,
We know it's a, you know, we know it's a whipping post job, but it's okay. All right, if you have a dissenting, opinion, I would absolutely encourage somebody not to raise their hand and let that be that way, and then that way the commissioners can see that it wasn't unanimous. Everybody wasn't just in lockstep. That's fine.
Well, like I said, yeah, I have opposed a lot of stuff sitting on this board and on the boards as well. But this was one where the unanimity of it and the degree of passion lets me, and I respect all of you people. I said, you know, I might be wrong on this one. And I doubted myself, that's why I backed away.
Louis, I'll say this to you and every other member of this board. If we've got an environment where someone feels as though they have to vote a certain way because of the way everyone else is voting, then I have failed you as a chairman. Please, please vote your conscience. Vote your opinion based on the facts.
I voted my conscience. That's what I'm trying to tell you, okay? I had a reevaluation. I said, you know, I don't think I'm right on this one.
And to the last point, just some clarification, the 3-minute rule is something that's been in place for a while, and the reason that I stuck to it, and I probably gave Representative Brody a little more time than I should have in questioning, following up, just as a courtesy, mainly to Louis and some of his points. But if we make exceptions for one person, we have to make exceptions for others. And that was highlighted in this last rezoning case where we set a precedent. And that's something that I don't want to do, is set a precedent where we have rules, but they don't really matter. So that's my logic, love it or hate it, but that's just where my head was at.
Is there any mechanism where we can have a kind of like friend of the court thing where we can tell Brody, hey, listen, you know, you will be a spokesman for the opposition and you can speak freely? Or is that something we could do?
He cannot speak as a representative. That's against the state law.
I mean, a representative of the opposition, not of the state representative.
Yeah, he can't speak, he
Going
can't
back-
speak like that.
Going back to what they've said in the past, when the tower came up, that the question was posed in advance, can we just have one person speak on behalf of the group? And that was against the rules. We would have had to make an exception. And I said no, because we would have to make an exception, and then there's others that would ask. So that's my personal stance on
Well,
it.
there is a precedent in that Chatsworth, because Chatsworth Homeowner Association president got up and said, we have Melanie Cox here, and we would like her to express our opinions as one. Am I correct on that, Lee? Didn't that happen, something like that?
It may have, I'd have to go back and look.
I think maybe it's the second meeting, I don't know, but something like that happened, and we listened to her, and that's when a lot of this yelling and screaming started happening, because somebody wanted to say something, and all that they didn't get to say, Mr. Chairman, so.
Well, that's some of the issue you may run into if you, because what you're doing is you're giving, those folks are giving their time to someone else. I know the commissioners specifically don't allow that. But, you know, if a homeowners association stands up and says, well, we're gonna cede our time to this one person, and you got somebody in the HOA that thinks another way, that maybe they support this application, and all of a sudden, I don't get to speak my mind and support. So that's the issue you may run into.
It's a slippery slope, and I personally don't want to set that precedent.
I wouldn't do it.
I thought we were going to filibuster for a minute.
That being said, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Have a good night.
I sure was to vote no. I'm just kidding.
Well, it wasn't dull, that's for sure.
And that concludes the Tuesday, January 4th,